I remember the sound before I remember the words. The scrape of cutlery against porcelain. The wet laughter of people too comfortable to notice cruelty when it's served warm. The faint tremor in my own hand as I lifted my glass, pretending the tremble was from age and not anger. Thanksgiving in Austin. My daughter Ashley's house. Her husband Brian at the head of the table, the position I used to hold without question. They'd built this ritual around themselves, polished it to look like independence. But everything they had was born from my labor. I had paid for the down payment, the furniture, the college that made Ashley speak like she was allergic to humility. And yet, in that house, surrounded by my blood, I was the visitor. The turkey steamed at the center like a peace offering that no one intended to keep. The air smelled of butter, rosemary, and false gratitude. Candles flickered against the glass of the dining room cabinet, my wife's old set, the one I'd given Ashley when she married Brian. I told myself it was a gesture of trust, a passing of the torch. But now, under that light, I saw it for what it was. A relic surrendered to strangers who shared my name. I had promised myself I would endure the evening quietly. Smile, nod, accept the small humiliations that came with aging, the gentle jokes about retirement, the half-sincere questions about my health, the way they spoke over me when business was mentioned. That's what family dinners become, eventually. A slow retreat from relevance. But I didn't expect the words that ended it. It was after dessert. Ashley had refilled her wine, her laugh already fraying into a slur. Brian was talking about property taxes, pretending to know more than he did. My grandson Noah was on his phone beneath the table. Lily was flicking at the crumbs near her plate. Nobody looked at me. Nobody ever does when they think they've outgrown you. Then Ashley looked up, her cheeks flushed, her smile bright and cruel. "Dad," she said, in that sing-song tone she used when she wanted to remind the room that I was old. "Your place is in a nursing home now." The words slipped out so easily that for a second I thought I'd misheard. But then came the laughter. Brian's deep, nervous chuckle. Her friend's sharp giggles. Even Noah snorted, glancing around as if checking whether it was safe to laugh too. My throat tightened. No one corrected her. Not one person said, "That's enough." I watched their faces. My daughter's, her husband's, the relatives I'd helped through their own crises. Each of them amused, relieved, united by my quiet humiliation. The room spun slightly, not from wine but from disbelief. I had built every comfort around them, the trust, the company, the roof above their heads, and they were laughing at the idea of putting me away like an outdated appliance. I didn't say a word. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the tile, a harsh sound that sliced through their laughter. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Ashley blinked, half smiling still, as if unsure whether I was joking too. But when I stood, she looked away. I walked out, through the kitchen that smelled of sugar and smoke, past the photographs on the wall, my face in every one of them, smiling beside the people who were now strangers. I didn't stop for my coat, didn't wait for anyone to call after me. They didn't. Outside, the night was sharp with wind. The stars were pale, distant, indifferent. I stood by my car, keys in hand, and stared at the reflection in the window. An old man, yes, but not the kind who needed anyone's permission to exist. The anger came quietly, not as fire but as ice. Clarity so clean it frightened me. I thought of the decades behind me. The long drives to Ashley's school when she was sick and her mother couldn't leave work. The years I spent building Reed construction from the ground up. The nights I'd slept in my office so she could sleep under a roof I paid for. Every sacrifice now rewritten into a punchline. It wasn't just her words that hurt. It was what they revealed, that somewhere along the line, I had stopped being her father and become her beneficiary, her safety net, the aging figure whose wealth outlived his dignity. And I realized something simple, something final. They didn't love me. They loved the security I represented. So I drove home, the headlights cutting through the Austin dark, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt deliberate. The house was silent when I entered, the kind of silence that waits for decisions. I poured a drink I didn't finish, set it on the table, and stared at the ledger of my life, files, statements, trusts, signatures. All the invisible strings that bound them to me. I had always imagined those strings as proof of care. But that night, they looked like shackles, and every one of them could be cut. I made the first call at 10:17 p.m. My lawyer answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the surprise in it. "Mr. Reed, it's late. Is everything all right?" "Everything's clear," I said. "I want to amend the trust. Effective immediately. Remove Ashley Reed as power of attorney. Terminate her management role at the company. Draft the documents tonight." He hesitated only a moment before replying, "Understood." The next call was to my accountant. He didn't need context. Numbers are merciful that way. They don't ask for reasons, only confirmations. I told him to freeze the joint accounts. Cancel all guarantees tied to Brian Cooper's car, Ashley's mortgage, their revolving credit lines. He said he'd handle it before morning. One by one, I felt the weight shift, the levers of control returning to my hand like tools I'd forgotten I still owned. Each confirmation email, each notarized phrase, felt like a small, precise revenge. Not against them, but against my own years of surrender. By midnight, it was done. The trust revised, signatures scheduled, notifications queued. They would wake to a different world. I sat in the dark of my study, the air humming with quiet finality. The city outside murmured through the windows. Sirens, wind, the hum of distant traffic. I thought of Ashley as a child, running barefoot through the backyard, shouting that she'd build something bigger than her father's company. And I thought of the woman who had looked across a Thanksgiving table and told that same man where he belonged. I had spent a lifetime teaching her strength, but I had never taught her mercy. That failure was mine, and now it would be corrected in the only language she respected: consequence. I turned off the light. The reflection in the glass was clearer now. A man who had finally remembered that kindness without respect is servitude. Tomorrow they would laugh less. Tomorrow the accounts would freeze, the phones would ring, and the world would shift back into its rightful balance. But tonight, I simply sat in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the house, my house, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because I finally understood what she meant when she said my place was in a nursing home. She wasn't talking about care. She was talking about absence. She wanted a world without the weight of my authority, without the shadow of the man who had built everything she took for granted. And maybe she would get that world, but not the way she expected. By the time the first light touched the blinds, my decisions were sealed. Ashley would still have her husband, her home, her laughter. What she wouldn't have was the safety net that made cruelty easy. The family might call it revenge. They'd be wrong. Revenge is emotional. This was arithmetic, the simple correction of an imbalance too long ignored. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to the silence. "You wanted freedom, Ashley. Now you have it." Then I smiled, faintly, not from satisfaction but from understanding. Thanksgiving was over. The giving part, at least. Morning came like judgment. Not loud, not sudden, just steady, inescapable. The kind of dawn that strips away illusions and leaves only the shape of what's left. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the study, watching the pale light crawl up the window blinds, waiting for the first phone call. It didn't take long. The world moves quickly when money stops moving. By 7:30, my phone buzzed with confirmations. The accounts frozen, the authorizations revoked, the signatures validated. My lawyer's message came last, short, surgical. All powers of Ashley Reed suspended effective immediately. Trust updated. New management authorization ready for your approval. I stared at those words for a long time. They looked clean, bloodless. But I knew what they meant. The blade was already in motion. Brian Cooper, my son-in-law, would be the first to feel it. At 8:15 a.m., a courier left my office downtown with an envelope addressed to his home. A termination packet, notarized and sealed. Inside, a notice of contract dissolution, a demand for the return of company property, a revocation of all guarantees tied to his name. I imagined the scene as it would unfold. Brian standing in the kitchen, coffee in hand, expecting another day built on borrowed credit. Then the knock, the envelope, the words that undo a man's illusion of stability. I didn't need to be there. I'd seen enough collapses in my lifetime to know the sound they make. By 9, the ripples had started. My assistant texted that Brian's company email was already locked. Access denied. Keycards deactivated. Within minutes, the IT department replaced Ashley's credentials as well, her name erased from the system like chalk washed from a board. The message on the employee intranet was brief and absolute. All powers of Ashley Reed are revoked. Interim management to follow. The office, I knew, would fall silent. They'd whisper. They'd speculate. They'd wonder what she'd done to finally lose her father's protection. By 10, the first real panic arrived. The bank called to verify a sudden withdrawal attempt. Ashley trying to move funds from the trust-linked account before the freeze took hold. Denied. Then another alert. Brian's car lease flagged for default. My guarantee had been the collateral. Without it, the bank moved fast. The machine always does. I imagined their kitchen that morning, the same one where she'd laughed the night before. Ashley in her robe, phone pressed to her ear, her voice rising as polite voices on the other end repeated the same phrase. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your authorization is no longer valid." Brian pacing, his temper cracking through the facade of charm he wore around me. He'd built his confidence on borrowed money, borrowed authority, borrowed status. Now the scaffolding was gone, and all that remained was a man who'd mistaken inheritance for competence. I didn't feel joy picturing it, just inevitability, a system returning to balance. At 10:47 a.m., my lawyer called. "They've both reached out to the office," he said. "Do you want me to respond?" "No," I told him. "Let silence do the talking." The silence, I knew, would say everything words could not. By noon, the real consequences began to bloom. The mortgage company contacted Brian. Not for a polite reminder, but for collection. The joint line of credit tied to my guarantee was suspended. A cascade, unstoppable now. One account triggers another. One signature missing, and the whole machine stops humming. Ashley's assistant, a kind girl, too loyal for her own good, tried to use Ashley's credentials to access the payroll system. Security shut her out. I had told them to. Then the headlines hit the internal company board. Leadership restructure at Reed Construction. It wasn't public. Not yet. But the message was clear. I was back. Around 1 in the afternoon, my phone finally rang. "Ashley." I let it buzz until it stopped. Then it started again. And again. Eventually, I answered not out of cruelty but because curiosity is a powerful thing. Her voice came through small, uncertain. "Dad? What's happening?" "Brian just got served with something from the company. And the bank, they're saying the accounts are..." "Dad, please, this has to be a mistake." Her tone wavered between panic and entitlement. That old mix she'd inherited from comfort. I waited a long moment before answering. "It's not a mistake," I said. "It's correction. Correction." Her voice broke. "You can't just..." "I can," I said quietly. "And I did. You made it clear last night that my place is elsewhere. I'm giving you what you asked for." She tried to laugh, a sound too brittle to hold. "You're overreacting. I didn't mean it was a joke, Dad." Everyone was laughing. I wasn't. There was silence on the line. Heavy, slow, like realization sinking through layers of denial. "Dad," she whispered finally, "you can't do this to us." "I already have." Then I hung up. For a long time after, I just sat there. The phone didn't ring again. Outside my window, the city went about its business. Indifferent, alive, as if nothing had changed. But something had. Something invisible had snapped back into its rightful shape. I thought of Brian then, sitting at his desk surrounded by his trophies and plaques, realizing that every achievement he'd flaunted was under my name. The car in his driveway, mine. The house he bragged about at barbecues, financed on my guarantee. The very salary he used to take Ashley to dinner, approved by me. And now all of it was gone. I imagined the moment his phone pinged with the message from the leasing company. Your account is in default. Please return the vehicle to avoid legal action. The slow, sinking dread as he realized there would be no rescue call, no father-in-law to fix the mess. They had built their comfort on my trust, and they had mistaken that trust for weakness. I spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet routine, reviewing the company's books, signing a few overdue documents, approving new management hires. My hands moved steadily, almost peacefully. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was restoring equilibrium. People think power fades with age. They're wrong. It only grows quieter. Around sunset, my lawyer called again. Everything is formalized. They no longer have access to company accounts or trust distributions. Do you want to issue a statement? No, I said. The statement's already been made. I didn't need to tell the world what had happened. The world inside that house would tell the story for me. That night, I poured myself a drink and sat on the porch. The wind had changed. The air carried the smell of rain and distant cedar. I imagined Ashley pacing her kitchen, Brian shouting into his phone, the children watching from the doorway, too young to understand that the warmth around them was bought with someone else's patience. I wondered if she remembered, as a girl, how I used to tell her that every decision leaves a receipt, that life always sends the bill. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but eventually. Tonight, her bill had arrived. I didn't toast to it. I didn't celebrate. I simply watched the sky darken over the city I had built piece by piece, and felt the weight of years lifting one obligation at a time. For the first time in decades, I had nothing left to lose. The silence of the house was different now. Not lonely, not empty, but earned. And somewhere across town, as banks closed their ledgers and phones went unanswered, I imagined Brian staring at his own reflection, seeing not a husband or a provider, but a man who'd lived on borrowed ground. That's the thing about borrowed things, eventually they're called back. Tomorrow they'd start making calls to relatives, to friends, to anyone who could help. But the same people who had laughed with them last night would keep their distance now. No one rushes to help the family that mocked the hand that fed them. By midnight, I turned off the porch light. The phone sat on the table beside me, silent at last. And in that silence, I felt it, not triumph, not revenge. Just the slow, steady calm of balance restored. They would learn soon enough that dependence is not inheritance. That blood doesn't excuse betrayal. And when the next dawn came, I would not wake with bitterness, only with the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally, after a lifetime of giving, decided to stop. The first sign of fallout wasn't a phone call or a letter. It was silence, the kind that follows an explosion before anyone dares to move. For 2 days after the collapse, I heard nothing from Ashley or Brian. No messages, no apologies, only the faint echo of their absence. But silence has its own language. On the third morning, the papers began to arrive. Notifications from banks, confirmation letters from the trust, copies of termination filings, all addressed to me as the principal authority. Each one a small monument to a boundary restored. I stacked them neatly on my desk, the way a man might count his medals after battle. That afternoon, my sister-in-law called. Her tone was too soft, too deliberate. "Thomas," she said, "Ashley's been having a hard time. You know how things can get blown out of proportion." I stopped her. "Then let it stay blown." Pause, then a sigh. "She's your daughter." "She was my responsibility," I said. "That's not the same thing." She didn't call again. None of them did. The same relatives who'd laughed at that Thanksgiving table now stepped back, one by one, pretending neutrality while choosing a side. Family loyalty always dissolves quickest when money is involved. By the weekend, the whispers had reached me. Ashley crying to her friends about how her father had lost his mind. Brian complaining to anyone who'd listen that I'd sabotaged his career out of spite. They needed a story where they were victims. It was easier to bear than the truth. But truth has a way of bleeding through denial. When the mortgage company began the foreclosure process, Brian called me directly. The bravado in his voice was gone. "Thomas, listen, this doesn't have to go this way. We can fix this. I just need a little time." "You had years," I said. "I gave you all the time money could buy." Do you want us on the street? I want you to understand what streets look like when you don't build them yourself. He swore under his breath, muttered something about family, and hung up. That night, Ashley finally appeared at my door. She didn't knock at first, just stood there, her silhouette framed by the porch light. When I opened the door, she tried to smile. Failed halfway. "Dad?" she said. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. She came in quietly, her perfume faint under the smell of rain. For a moment, I saw the girl she used to be. The one who ran barefoot through the yard, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest after thunderstorms. That memory almost disarmed me. Almost. She sat at the kitchen table, the same place her mother once did before illness took her voice. "Brian's losing everything," she began. "The car, the house, his job. You've destroyed him." "I didn't destroy him," I said. "I stopped carrying him. You made us dependent." Her voice cracked. "You trained us to rely on you, and now you're punishing us for it." "That's not punishment, Ashley. That's consequence." She leaned forward, eyes shining with anger and something else. Fear. "You can't just cut your family off. You can't pretend we don't exist." I met her gaze steadily. "You're right. I can't pretend. But I can choose the terms of my existence within this family. And those terms no longer include financing your disrespect." For a moment, she said nothing. Her lip trembled, and I saw the fight drain from her. "I was drunk," she whispered. "It was a joke. I didn't mean it." I wanted to believe her, but jokes only work when they aren't true. She stood then, looking around the house. The framed photos, the smell of cedar and dust, the ticking clock that had outlasted every argument we'd ever had. "Do you even care what happens to Noah and Lily?" I took a slow breath. "More than anyone. That's why their future will not depend on the mistakes of their parents." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I've revised the trust," I said. "They'll be taken care of, scholarships, medical coverage, future support. But through the trust directly. You and Brian will have no access." Her eyes widened. "You went behind my back." "No," I said. "I simply removed yours from mine." She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man across the table. Maybe she didn't. Maybe for all her life, she had only known the version of me that gave without limits. When she left that night, she didn't say goodbye. Her taillights disappeared into the dark, leaving the road empty and wet behind her. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table with the newspaper unopened. The quiet was heavy, but it was an honest quiet. Not the strained silence of tolerance, but the calm that comes after something rotten has been cut away. Days turned into weeks. The news about Ashley and Brian spread through the extended family like gossip tends to. Embroidered, softened, retold until I became a cautionary tale. Thomas Reed went cold, they said. Age made him bitter. Some said it was dementia, others pride. It didn't matter. Let them think what they needed to sleep. Meanwhile, Noah and Lily kept calling. Their voices were hesitant, testing the boundaries of the grown-ups' war. I never let them see it. "You're always welcome here," I told them. "Whatever happens between your parents and me isn't your burden." On weekends, they came to visit. We fished at the creek behind the house. I showed Noah how to clean a reel, taught Lily how to skip stones. I didn't speak about the trust or the accounts or the collapse that had stripped their parents of pretense. I just let them be children, unbroken, untouched by adult betrayal. One afternoon, Noah asked, "Grandpa, why doesn't Mom come with us anymore?" I looked at him, so much of her in his face, but softer, unspoiled. "Sometimes adults forget how to talk to each other," I said. "But forgetting isn't the same as not caring." He nodded, accepting the half-truth as only children can. After they left, I sat on the porch and watched their car disappear down the hill. I thought of Ashley again, not as my daughter, but as a reflection of every mistake I'd made in how I'd raised her. I had taught her ambition, confidence, the will to command, but I had never taught her gratitude. I'd mistaken providing for parenting, authority for affection. Now I was correcting that too. The relatives who once filled my house during holidays now avoided me. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. It didn't bother me. A man learns, after enough winters, that solitude isn't punishment. It's purification. But there were moments late at night when I missed the noise, the clatter of dishes, the messy laughter, the sound of a house alive with motion. I missed what I thought we were, even if it was only an illusion. Still, I didn't waver. A week before Christmas, a letter arrived, handwritten, shaky, and signed but unmistakably hers. Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to speak to you anymore. Everything feels like a test I'm failing. Brian is gone most days, trying to find work. The kids miss you. I miss you too. I know you won't believe that, but it's true. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my mother's old rosary. I didn't reply. Words heal nothing without change. Instead, I wrote 2 new checks, one to a scholarship fund in Noah's name, one for Lily. Locked, irrevocable, untouched by their parents' reach. That was how I would love them now. Cleanly, without condition. Christmas came and went in quiet. I decorated the porch myself, set out 2 small gifts in case they visited. They didn't. Maybe next year. Maybe never. But I didn't feel bitterness anymore. Just a steady certainty that I had done what had to be done. I had given them freedom, the kind that burns before it teaches. Some nights I still ask myself whether I went too far, whether pride disguised itself as justice. But then I remember that laughter, her voice, her words, "Your place is in a nursing home now." And I realize, that was the moment she decided I was disposable. All I did was show her what disposability feels like. Now the house stands quiet but strong. My name on every title. My conscience lighter than it's been in years. I see my grandchildren when I choose, not when I'm summoned. I give because I decide to, not because I'm expected to. That's what freedom feels like at 68, not rebellion but restoration. And yet, some nights, when the wind moves through the trees and the lights flicker across the old photographs, I still ask the same question that haunts every father who's had to become a judge. Was I right to protect myself at the cost of my family? Or was this simply the price of raising children who forgot the meaning of gratitude? The storm ended quietly, not with shouting, not with apologies, but with absence. Weeks slipped into months, and the house began to forget the sound of other voices. There were no more frantic calls from banks, no more lawyers' letters, no more family gossip smuggled through sympathetic cousins. The noise of their lives faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own. Coffee at dawn, the paper folded cleanly, the slow, deliberate rituals of a man who has nothing left to prove. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was restoring order. That sentence became a kind of prayer to me, something I repeated whenever doubt tried to sneak in. Because doubt did come, some nights, carried in by the same wind that brushed the curtains and stirred the dust on the photographs lining the hallway. Ashley as a child, grinning through missing teeth. Her mother's arm around her, my own hand resting on her shoulder. We looked happy. Maybe we were. Or maybe we were just practicing it, the way people rehearse love until it becomes habit. I'd sit there, staring at those faces, and feel the ache of what I'd built and lost. But then I'd remember the laughter from that Thanksgiving table, the way it echoed around me like a verdict. And I'd whisper again, I wasn't seeking revenge. I was restoring order. The company thrived after the change. My new management team, younger, sharper, unburdened by family entitlement, brought life back into Reed Construction. For the first time in years, I enjoyed walking through those halls. There was respect again, not fear disguised as affection. The staff no longer watched my daughter's moods to predict their fates. They looked at me, at the founder. One afternoon, my assistant handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, Noah and Lily at a school event. No note, no signature, just the image. Noah holding a science trophy. Lily smiling beneath a paper crown. I knew Ashley had sent it, though she hadn't written her name. It was her way of showing me they were fine. Or maybe it was her way of asking if I still cared. I did. Of course I did. I placed the photo on my desk, beside a model of the first house I ever built. A small bungalow I'd constructed with my own hands 50 years ago. I'd always believed that building a family was like building a house. You start with foundations, you weather the storms, you keep repairing the cracks. But I see now that families rot from the inside if you let resentment leak through the walls. I had ignored those cracks for too long. The phone rang later that day, the first time Ashley had called in months. I hesitated before answering. "Dad." Her voice was smaller now. Tired. "I heard you promoted someone to run operations." "That's right. I used to do that." "You used to." Silence. Then, "I didn't call to fight. I just wanted to say, I understand now." I waited, saying nothing. "I thought you were cruel," she went on. "I told everyone you were. But after Brian left, after the bank took the house, I realized you were just holding me accountable. No one ever had." Her words sounded rehearsed, but honest enough. Still, I didn't trust them. Regret is easy when the bills arrive. "I'm not asking for money," she said quickly, as if reading my thoughts. "I just wanted you to know I've started working again. Part-time, at least. I'm managing a small design firm. It's not much, but it's mine." I felt something shift in me then. Not pride exactly, but a kind of relief. A father's instinct, too stubborn to die. "That's good, Ashley," I said. "Make something that's yours. And keep it that way." "I will." A pause. "The kids want to see you. They miss you. They can come anytime." She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you," before the line went quiet. After I hung up, I sat there for a long while. I didn't cry. I haven't in years, but I felt the heaviness leave my chest, as though some part of the world had realigned. Not perfectly, just enough. When Noah and Lily came that weekend, they brought the smell of youth back into the house. Noah had grown taller. Lily's laugh was louder, freer. They ran through the halls like light returning to a room long closed off. I made them pancakes the way their grandmother used to. They asked about their mother, about the old house, about why things changed. I told them the truth, or at least the portion of it they were ready to hold. "Your mother made choices," I said. "I made mine. But none of that changes how much I love you." They accepted it. Children always do when love is steady enough. After they left, I walked through the house again, touching the furniture I'd once considered burdensome. It all felt lighter now. Every chair, every wall, every book was mine again. Not a backdrop to someone else's entitlement. The relatives who had mocked me from the sidelines began to reappear slowly, like vultures testing if the corpse still breathes. They called under the pretext of concern. "How are you holding up, Thomas? We've all been thinking of you." I answered politely, never warmly. I'd learned that compassion without respect is just another transaction. By spring, Ashley sent another letter. Handwritten this time. She said she'd found an apartment near downtown, modest but comfortable. She was working steadily, even saving. She thanked me for setting up the kids' scholarships, though she said it made her feel undeserving. I smiled when I read that. Recognition was worth more than apology. I didn't reply to that one either. Some messages are better left hanging in the air, where they can do their quiet work. The seasons turned. I found new rhythms. Morning walks by the river, lunches alone, evenings spent repairing small things around the house. It's strange how peace feels at first like loneliness, then slowly becomes something cleaner, almost sacred. People like to think old age brings wisdom. It doesn't. It brings perspective, the distance needed to see that love without boundaries is just slow self-erasure. Ashley's family learned that too late. But at least they learned. Once, at a charity event that summer, I saw Brian from across the room. He looked smaller somehow, thinner, his confidence eroded. He avoided me, pretended not to notice, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Recognition mixed with shame. That was enough. No need for words. Some debts are paid in silence. I drove home that night along the empty highway, the city lights shrinking behind me. The radio played an old song my wife used to hum when she cooked. For the first time in years, I didn't change the station. When I reached the house, I left the porch light on. I don't know for whom, maybe for Ashley, maybe for no one at all. But it felt right. A small act of grace for a man who had spent so long practicing restraint. Before bed, I stood by the window and looked out across the yard. The trees swayed gently in the wind. The air smelled faintly of rain. Everything was quiet, balanced, earned. People will say I was harsh, that I let pride ruin what could have been repaired. Maybe they're right. Maybe I mistook justice for control, consequence for compassion. But here's the truth that no one at that table understood. Love built on obligation is a slow kind of death. I had been dying that way for years. Now, finally, I was living again, even if that living meant alone. Sometimes, I still hear her laughter from that night, the one that broke something in me for good. But now it doesn't sting. It reminds me of the cost of silence, the price of letting love become entitlement. The house creaks as the night settles in. The clock ticks. The world outside keeps turning. I pour myself a small glass of whiskey, raise it toward the empty dining room, and whisper to no one in particular. To balance restored. Then I let the silence have the last word. Because peace, I've learned, doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from no longer needing to be. So tell me, after everything you've heard, after every decision laid bare, was I wrong to reclaim my place not at their table, but in my own life? Or was this simply what it takes to remind a family that love without respect is not family at all?